Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
So this company has built this mammoth social media operation that is mostly pushing out nonsense content or clickbaity, stupid content that is working to attract clicks. But they're now starting to integrate into that content pro-Russian happy talk fake history material and some oddly sort of subtle anti-U.S. stuff. Like this video, which suggests that the United States is one of the top 10 countries in the world that's most likely to not exist anymore within the next 20 years. Because the United States is going to disappear. At least Alaska and Texas are definitely going to secede, but that's probably only the beginning. And they don't portray this as some screed against the United States. It's just tucked in among all the other countries that might no longer exist sometime soon. As Lisa Kaplan argues at Lawfare this week in this investigative piece, one of the things to watch here is that as this huge Russian social media presence has been developed in the United States, they've started doing this pro-Russia, undermining the U.S. sort of subtle content. And they've started poking around the edges of buying overtly political content about U.S. politics that, in the future, if it tests well, they could presumably decide to ship to their gazillions of online followers. Again, in terms of taking up space on YouTube, it's Disney and Warner Media and then these guys. I mean, remember what we learned in the Russian social media operation in 2016 to target our election in 2016 to benefit Trump, right? We learned it both in the criminal indictments against the Russian military intelligence officers who were charged by Robert Mueller. We learned it in the Senate report reviewing how that Russian information operation worked against us. One of their key plays was that they would build up seemingly non-political content. They'd have lots of different avatars, lots of different accounts on lots of different social media platforms, attracting U.S. viewership, attracting likes, attracting followers, all doing stuff that didn't seem to be overtly political at all. It was just designed to get people clicking there, just designed to get into people's feeds. And then when it came time to turn those things operational for the purposes of American political impact, those seemingly non-political channels started pushing out material that was designed to influence the election. And a big part of the impact, you want to capture the maximum number of eyeballs, well, you better have the maximum number of subscribers already looking at your content before you become a political operation. Well, boy, are they doing that now. With the election of 2020 now bearing down upon us. I mean, the Iowa caucuses are 6 weeks away, right? It's Super Bowl Sunday. Then the first Monday in February, the day after Super Bowl Sunday, is the Iowa caucuses. I mean, how prepped are we, really? How prepped are the Democratic candidates and the Democratic Party for contending with a potentially major foreign-based social media operation that this time will be run under the auspices here of a federal government headed up by a president who was just impeached for inviting foreign intervention in the next election and who has explicitly stated that he's good with it? I mean, it's one thing to not be ready because you didn't see it coming. This time we definitely see it coming. But the question is, how much help's the U.S. government going to be under the leadership of President Trump? And how well are the Democrats and the Democratic Party preparing to do their own work on this, particularly if they're not going to get help from the Justice Department under William Barr and from the intelligence agencies under President Trump? Joining us now is Ben Collins. He's a tech and media reporter for NBC News who's been working this beat. Ben, thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
First of all, I feel like the more I read on this subject and the more I come to understand on this subject, I gain increasing confidence in my ability to understand this stuff myself and become frightened by it.
Yeah.
I do not have a lot of confidence in my ability to explain it in a way that's going to convey these things to other people. It's hard to talk about in terms of its import.
Sure. I think the most important thing to note here is that it's creating a simulated environment in the United States where people believe things that they may not necessarily believe. This is 55 million people, or you know what, maybe some of them were not people this whole time, but 55 million Facebook accounts followed these accounts that were pulled down today. And they were saying uniformly one thing politically. And you know what? The people who joined these groups, they weren't there to talk about President Trump. They were there to look at the teeth brushing videos that you were just talking about. Mm-hmm. But over time, what they do is they build up confidence that, hey, you know, this is a reliable person. This is a real American. This guy has a real photo, as far as I can tell. He's from down the street. He says he's from Denver or whatever. So they create these identities that look American, and then they shift the tide politically with just subtly over the course of time.
And the thing that is insidious about it that I didn't quite understand until literally the litigation, the criminal cases brought in the wake of the Internet Research Agency stuff in Russia, was that it makes sense operationally for these online presences, these avatars, these accounts, to build up in a non-political context. And it can be, you know, that it's helpful hints for whitening your ogre teeth, or it's, you know, how to tie your shoes faster, or it's I love motorcycles, or it's I love Texas, or it's I sure, you know, hate the police, or, you know, like, you know, you pick anything, any cause that might attract Americans, any stripe of Americans, and you build up their interest and their following because you get them to trust you, and then you become operational in a way that's designed to influence the election at some later time after you've already got them on the hook.
Right. And I think it was important work by Stopes, it's important work by everybody who covered this stuff to get this now, to narrow this down now. Because we don't know what this sort of unleashed would have looked like in a year. The Epoch Times had already been banned from buying ads on Facebook. They were the largest buyer of pro-Trump ads on Facebook before this. They already got caught manipulating the platform.
Wait, slow down there for a second. So when you reported on this in August, the largest online purchaser of pro-Trump ads was the Trump campaign. The second largest purchaser of pro-Trump ads was Epoch Times when your reporting got them shut down.
That's correct, yes.
And now they're back.
Yes, and now they're back. And by the way, they weren't shut down for their messages. This is the thing that Facebook really wants to say over and over again. This stuff was found in the data. It was very easy for them to find these fake identities because they looked so weird over time. Mm-hmm. And they all worked in packets, right? They all worked in groups together. So it wasn't about the messages. It was about the fact that they kept creating fake people over and over again and said, hey, we're real people. We swear to God. And also we're going to buy some ads. So this is the second time they've pulled this off. This is a larger time they've pulled it off, like just sheer numbers. And I guess the most important thing is we don't know if it's still happening. This takes a lot of internal work from Facebook, a lot of work from reporters being like, hey, Facebook, what's going on here? This looks very fishy. So their end game has never been pulled off. Like, they haven't meddled in an election in the way that they want to yet.
But they keep building the machine to try to do it.
building the machine.
Facebook is calling this artificial amplification, which I think is a helpful way to think about it. It's one thing to compete in the marketplace of ideas. I mean, that's what elections are all about, including political advertising. But to be creating foreign-based robot armies that are artificially amplifying your message is a form of information warfare. It feels like we don't have defense for it at all. Ben Collins, tech and media reporter for NBC News. The best defense we have is to understand it, and you're doing great work.
Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.
It is Monday, the 23rd of December of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. That's right. We are, it's Christmas Eve, folks, and we have a lovely dish that we've concocted. Yes, we've put all the ingredients left over from another one of those busy weekends and have really curated quite a lovely gourmet dish for your, well, gourmet and gourmand dining pleasure, so to speak, because this salon is a salon for food for thought. And let's hope it's nutritious and not just a sugar high. Yes, we try not to get too siloed, though I will say I don't really put very much pro-bigotry and racism out there to balance out the argument, because that doesn't balance the argument now, does it? I've had one of those busy weekends batting back the denial of systemic racism in our society and really in our country from the very beginning. The original sin. Apparently, we liberals are nothing but authoritarian race baiters, and we want to kill everybody who doesn't think like us in their sleep. And how would they know? Well, that's what I've had to put up with. Apparently, we are the authoritarians who want to kill people. And I keep looking around thinking, we don't have icebox baby gulags. We're not locking up little white kids because they're white and ripping them from their parents because they're white. Or Trumpians. The only people who are doing that are you-know-who. But we are the race baiters. We are the real racists. That's right. I'm anti-Jewish for sticking up for, the Holocaust. Not sticking up for it, but, the history of it. Because I am now confronted with, I see it coming, a diminution of the Holocaust. It wasn't really as bad. It's just liberals trying to use this to shut down a conversation. Yeah, the only people using that to shut down a conversation are you guys by bringing it up. All right? So, apparently, there's nothing that is motivated in this country that stems out of race. It's all really economic anxiety, self-interest and economic anxiety. Any of us, we have to admit on our side that any of us who would dare, if we're not being hung up on an oak tree and until we're squirming dead and then set on fire, we can't really speak about racism because it doesn't impact us. And the only reason that we do it anyway is out of self-interest, and apparently the only self-interest we liberals have to fight racism and bigotry is to look good. That's what I was told. I just want to look good. Try bringing up some history. Personal history, for instance, like crosses burned on your lawn, fire bombs thrown at the house, our cat set on fire. Why? Because we deigned to fight for black and brown people to be able to vote. And then we not only did that, we actually went out and registered people to vote. And that was the worst thing that anybody could do. We were traitors to our race. Bring that up, and it's okay, Boomer. Yeah. We just want to shut down the conversation, don't we, by bringing up the facts. So I'm quite tired of it. I don't have any patience. I have to say, I ran out of patience for that side quite a long time ago. Facts do not matter. If you give them emotion that they have given you, if you give like emotion in return, you're a killer liberal authoritarian who's going to force them to give up their freedoms because other people have freedoms. I will say that one did admit that he processes all of that differently than I and some others do. And I have to say I agree. But at the same time, the fellow puts on a pompous air of faux intellectualism, a veneer of it. He hides his small-minded bigotry behind a veneer of faux intellectualism. That is, it's such a thin veneer, you see right through it. Everybody does. And yet the pomposity of, not only this individual, but others as well, is such that they project all of their worst angels on everybody else. They hate the world, and then they blame the world for making them hate it. So I have to say I lost a little bit more patience in this holiday season of peace and love. I know we're just supposed to let the bigots go off on their bigotry, because to stand up to their hate would show that you are hateful too. Sorry. I don't demark the calendar by holiday seasons, and now we're going to have a truce now. There has been an argument, where can we have common ground? And maybe food, but not even there. Not even there. You think like politics about impeachment and stuff. Talk about the politics of food. Jeez. So can't have a common ground there, obviously. How about being a good neighbor? Well, this whole argument against what they call PC culture is because they don't want to be good neighbors. They don't want to be forced to be nice, or at least to shut up and not gum up the works by their whatever anger and I don't know. This is where we are. And Rachel spelled it out very clearly at the top there. Though I must say, Rachel is nothing but a propagandist. And even though they parrot everything that comes off of Fox News, they're smart enough to know we don't watch Fox. Yeah, you watch Sinclair, and Fox is on Sinclair too, so shut up. Jesus. All right. If you're a trained investigative journalist, you can't be trusted. But if you're somebody screaming like you're going to have a brain hemorrhage from your blood pressure popping a blood vessel in your brain, like Alex Jones, well, those people are to be trusted. Look how passionate they are. And yet, we will be condemned for our emotion. Oh, did you know that you cannot convey emotion in writing? And I'm thinking, wow, poets would have a hard time doing their work if they weren't conveying emotions. And of course, everything that anyone processes is how they process it. It doesn't matter if it comes by words on the page. It can come when you're speaking to them right to their face. Now, I know you can't sometimes, for people who have a lack of humor in their life, they don't get jokes on the page. And I got to tell you, there's that behavior is predominant on one political side of the spectrum. So, yeah, granted, some people can't figure out a joke when they're reading it. And when you read the transcripts of Nixon with all of his invectives, hearing it with the inflections on the invective gave it a little bit more nuance. But all it took back in the day were people to read that Nixon said that. Just by reading it. They knew what he meant, conveyed a lot of emotion too, and people processed it by what they know. So apparently you can't convey emotion, and all you can do is convey words. God, I hate these people who hide behind that veneer of faux intellectualism. God, I mean, I just have to say, maybe the educational system has devolved to such an extent that this particular person's around my son's age, maybe a little bit older. Oh, and let me jump in real quick and say this. There was a hashtag 2019 in 5 words. And I said, my son died, insurmountable grief. And I want to thank everybody who has responded. I didn't expect and didn't even think maybe I shouldn't have shared it. But that's been my 2019, is that it's been one whole year of grief I can't get through a day. Used to be I couldn't get through minutes. I mean, it would be all day. At least I, have moments. More long moments, shall we say. But I want to thank everybody, all right, for reaching out. Now, this one particular fellow that I've been in contention with has been taking the tact. Sounds suspiciously like Ron Paul. and Lyndon LaRouche. Let's just leave it there. All right. And all of that libertarian gobbledygook, that everything is out of self-interest. You know, the guy never heard of unconditional love. Everything is transactional. I give you something, you gotta give me something in return. I expect it. And yet, I don't know, maybe this was, the one thing from the hippie movement that I really held on to after I became a punk was the idea of unconditional love. That you love without expecting love in return. You just love, otherwise it's not love. That's what I came to understand. I also, just out of just experience. There's a story, Martin Eden by Jack London, where before he became the famous writer Martin Eden, which was, just a stand-in for Jack London, and it's pretty much an autobiographical novel if you want to read Martin Eden and understand Jack London and how he came to be. But when he first started out and he heard that publishers were paying by the word, he would write these really wordy pieces and then expect to be paid for them. Well, after time, every writer finds out, well, that's not the case. If you can't take rejection, you can't be a writer. All right. So, I learned long ago that when I send stuff out, I don't expect it to get published. Unless I've sold it beforehand, which is the way you're supposed to do it. But, sometimes I don't know what I'm going to write till I write it. And then I got to shop it around. I know, it's a little ass backwards, but that's the way I do it. So I have never expected to be published, and it's such a joy when I am, I will admit. So when I'm out helping someone who has been splattered on the street because some car jumped the curb, do I expect payment from that person because I helped scrape them up off the street and I'm going to exact that payment from their surviving heirs? Because I got to get mine? I don't know. But of course, every argument now is pointed to, well, you're not selfless. Look at your self-promotion. Yeah, I'm a great self-promoter. Look at me. I'm living in a mansion, aren't I? Jesus. Everything is out of self-interest. No, it's not. Sometimes it's out of true unconditional love, or at least trying to do that. No one is a success in that, but we try. Well, Merry Christmas. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Oh my God, look at the time. Well, this first story is going to be a long story, and I better get into it. A federal judge revoked the recently reinstated federal grazing permit for the Trump-pardoned Oregon ranchers at the center of the 2016 armed takeover of the Malheur Wildlife Refuge. Yeah, there were some ranchers up here who were going to jail, well, because they burned a big forest. I don't know. For self-interest, all right? And they got busted and they had to go to jail, and that's why Malheur got taken over. Because, property rights and the feds. Washington State sued the Trump administration for arresting immigrants at courthouses. Well, if you're a victim of a crime and you're an immigrant, what better place to pick them up? And that's where they go. And 3 GOP attorneys general sue to block the Equal Rights Amendment. Why? Because it might protect abortion. Those little ladies have no right to autonomy over their bodies. No, they don't. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where British supermarket giant Tesco suspended a Chinese supplier of Christmas cards after a message was found inside a card saying it had been packed by foreign prisoners who are victims of forced labor. Now, I've always said that, when you get some Chinese products, they're not really of the best quality because it's really hard to motivate political slave labor. And it's pretty damn hard to motivate any kind of slave labor, if you ask me. And British media reported that Trump has invited Boris Johnson to the White House in the new year. Well, at least it's before Kim Jong-un, who will be coming soon, maybe on a missile. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the page from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then find the link to our Patreon page. And those of you who have been listening to this show for a while, I know this is a broken record. I'm sorry. You can get a cup of coffee now. But to all of those others, and really everybody, we are unable to do this without your financial help, and your recurring contributions really, really does help. We got to get some newish machinery, and of course now at the beginning of the year, all the big bills come in from our different vendors, the server and the hosting company and everybody. It's a big bill that comes in. And we have to get newish machinery too that doesn't come free. They actually expect something in return for that. Nothing unconditional about the PC or the Mac. So thank you for your generosity in helping us resist, really as the founders originally intended. Which ones? Well, we like to think the ones way back, at the before the signing of the Constitution. Those founders. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and we thank Tom for doing so. I take care of at Justice Putnam. You could follow me there, and it would be a good spot to do so, because I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on social media for people's social media linkage pleasure. And you can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. Pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Okay, station news here. Of course, you do know that it is the holiday season. Happy Hanukkah, everybody. And Merry Christmas to those of you who are about ready to celebrate Christmas. And Happy Kwanzaa as well, because that's here as well. All right, we will be going on a regular program and special holiday programming mix starting sometime tomorrow. I will be traveling north to visit with my grandkids for the holidays. And, of course, you do know, in a year of firsts, or the first year of firsts, we're getting about to the end of the journey here, getting through this first year and all of these holidays that remind you that your loved one, who happens to be your adult son, is no longer in this plane of existence. And so the kids are remarkable. I know they're sad, and I was a kid too. I didn't show everything to adults. No, you didn't. But they are remarkable. They're resilient. My son prepared them for the possibility, or the grave possibility, of his demise, because that's what he was told. He didn't tell us because I guess he didn't want us to worry. Regardless, I will be traveling north, and so we will have a mix of our regular and special holiday programming. David will have tomorrow, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day will be pods, and then he will be back live on Thursday and Friday, so you will not miss any of David in his regular time. And I don't know when I'll be coming back, either Thursday or Friday, so I'm not sure if I'll have shows myself for the rest of the week, but the days will be filled out with some great regular programming, of course, and some great special holiday programming, because we have a lot of holidays now, and we want to celebrate them all, especially when there's food involved. That's what I like. That's the common ground I like. Okay, let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. It's fairly long. I'm not going to get through it all. It's a comprehensive reportage on these ranchers named the Hammonds. And Ryan Zinke, really in contravention to everything that his department and the DOJ and everybody else had recommended and pretty much put down in writing as the law, circumvented. And so a judge had to come in and right that wrong. Maxine Bernstein, a great reporter up here, writes for the Oregonian, and does some great work on her own too. She follows extremists here in the Northwest, like the Patriot Prayer types and the secessionists and all that. She's got a great body of work. So a federal judge revoked the grazing permit for Hammond Ranches Inc., finding that former Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke's order renewing it early this year was an abuse of discretion. Dwight Hammond Jr. and his younger son, Stephen Hammond, can reapply for a new permit and go through the proper process to obtain one, U.S. District Judge Michael H. Smith said. Oh, I should just reiterate, Maxine Bernstein does indeed write for the Oregonian, and this article is out of the Oregonian. Got to make that clear. Neither Zinke or the U.S. Bureau of Land Management made a finding that the Hammonds were in substantial compliance with federal grazing regulations or had a satisfactory history of performance as required, the judge found. Well, Zinke just gave it to him because he's part of this whole land grab of federal property, too. The article goes on. The judge says Secretary Zinke simply avoided the issue altogether. Under federal law and agency regulations, he may not do this, the judge wrote in a 41-page ruling issued after he heard oral arguments last Thursday. The Secretary's failure to comply with the governing statute and regulations acknowledged his departure from agency policy and practices, and he also departed from the whole agency, too, and provided a reasoned explanation for that departure are all serious errors, the judge found. 3 environmental advocacy groups, the Western Watersheds Project, the Center for Biological Diversity and the Wild Earth Guardians, had sued the Interior Secretary and the BLM, arguing that Zinke acted as if he was above the law. Wow, that seems like a constant behavior in this administration. By failing to consider the Hammonds' unsatisfactory record or do proper environmental reviews before ordering the renewal of the grazing permit in February. Secretary Zinke's errors were egregious. He simply ignored the law, he ignored the regulations, and invented a rationale out of thin air, the group's lawyer David Becker argued. He renewed the permit for a grantee who has demonstrable records of not being a good steward of public lands. Now let's remember what the Hammonds did. First, they were poaching deer that wandered onto federal property that they considered their own because their animals were grazing on it without a permit. It's sort of like adverse possession. Notorious adverse possession. If no one comes and tells you can't do it, you keep doing it. It's yours? Yeah. Try arguing with them about whether some brown people doing that as squatters' rights would work. I don't think so. Not in white utopia, Oregon. Regardless. So when they were caught, to hide their tracks, they burned down a whole forest that then got out of hand. And for that, They were indicted and charged and convicted. And then the son did it again. And as they were going to jail, that's when Malheur Wildlife Refuge was taken over by these right-wing militias bent on destroying America. And this was their chance, and they got sucker for being some very fine people. Next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays, comes out of the Associated Press. Washington State sued the Trump administration, seeking to stop its practice of arresting people at courthouses for immigration violations, saying it interferes with the state's authority to run its judicial system and endangers public safety. Well, that's a feature, not a bug, isn't it? The lawsuit filed in U.S. District Court in Seattle says that when ICE and Border Protection agents patrol courthouse hallways and parking lots, it deters crime victims and witnesses from testifying and interferes with criminal prosecutions. Well, you can't use immigrants committing crimes if their victims, who also happen to be immigrants, testify and then send those people to jail. We can't have those immigrants only committing crimes against their own. We need them committing crimes against people that look white. And what better way to do that than to arrest their victims and deport them to another country for some trumped up, you had a parking ticket, so therefore you violated U.S. law. Goodbye. The cartels are waiting for you. Among the hundreds of people recently arrested at courthouses in Washington state were an assault victim, a domestic violence survivor seeking a protection order, and a married father of U.S. children with a pending application for legal permanent residency, Attorney General Bob Ferguson said. Federal immigration officials are arresting people with no criminal history at all. They are arresting people who are paying traffic tickets. They are arresting people who are crime victims, Ferguson said. As a result, and not surprisingly at all, individuals are refusing to participate in our justice system, and that is another feature, not a bug, by white supremacists like that ghoul, Stephen Miller, who I swear to God, after we put him through the tribunal at Nuremberg, Pennsylvania, we're shipping his ass right to The Hague. Of the American Independent brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. 3 Republican attorneys general filed suit hoping to derail an effort to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. The case, filed in federal court, argues the Archivist of the United States should not count any new states that ratify the Equal Rights Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, as the deadline established by Congress for the amendment has expired. But beyond the procedural concerns, Attorneys General Steve Marshall, Repug of Alabama, Jeff Landry, Repug of Louisiana, and Jason Ravnsborg, Repug of South Dakota. All men, do you think, and their boy too, also warned that ratification would not promote true equality, but rather a far-left agenda, and would undermine the progress women have made. The proposed ERA simply states, equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex, and gives the Congress the power to enforce it through legislation. But in their filing, the trio argues if the ERA were ratified today, activists would urge courts to use this amendment to overturn legitimate regulations of abortion and to mandate state funding of abortions. What's more, they claim judges might overturn prisons that separate inmates based on their sex. They might separate sports teams for women and other sex-specific segregation. These would only be impacted by the amendment if they were deemed to be a denial of equal rights. Don't give the little ladies anything. We're having such a hard time at home already, and now you're going to make it legal in the public square. When Congress voted in 1972 to send the Equal Rights Amendment to the states, it included a 7-year deadline for the needed 38 states to ratify. Congress later extended this deadline to 1982, but supporters only got 35 states to ratify by that time. Still, some legal experts have argued that the Constitution does not permit deadlines for ratification of amendments. With legislators in Nevada in 2017 and Illinois in 2018 voting in favor of ratification and new Democratic majorities in Virginia expected to do so next year, it is likely that the courts will have to decide the question in this case or another. The Alabama Attorney General's lawsuit to halt the progress of the ERA toward full ratification in the United States Constitution is a deeply disappointing attempt to continue to deny women and men from gaining full constitutional equality. A spokesperson for the Alice Paul Institute said, it replicates decades-old misinformation campaigns that further deny citizens access to the truth. Now, the Republican Party once backed equal rights for women. Its platforms in 1952, 1956, 1960, and 1972. Oh, and 1976, Jimmy Carter. Each expressly endorsed the Equal Rights Amendment. Well, of course, they were all commies back then now, weren't they? Oh, my. Well, we better get to our break. Wow, we have really gone a long time today, but that's okay. It's holiday season. Let's get to our abbreviated break, and when we get back, we will be going through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to Netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. There's a lot of advertising mythology about what causes dandruff, like this.
Here's why clean scalp is important. Your hair roots must breathe, or there's trouble, deep trouble, dandruff, flakes of dry...
Dandruff itself is actually a very, very complicated condition.
Microbiologist and molecular biologist Barry Murphy of Unilever in the UK says dandruff is a perfect storm of flakiness, involving your fungal microbiome, the health and oiliness of the skin on your scalp, even weather. His team set out to investigate the microbial component. They sequenced DNA from the heads of people with healthy hair and from others with dry, dandruffy scalps, none of whom had used anti-dandruff shampoo within the last 6 months. As previous studies have found, they spotted 10 times as much of a type of fungus called Malassezia on dandruffy scalps versus the healthy cohort. But they also found that populations of a bacterium called Staphylococcus capitis spiked on flaky scalps.
Really, really interestingly, we found that there was approximately 100 times more of this bacteria on a dry or a dandruff scalp than there was on a healthy scalp.
But it's still a mystery why it's there, or what it's doing. The results are in the journal PLOS ONE. Murphy's employer Unilever makes its own anti-dandruff products, so this could be useful information someday. But rather than just zapping scalp fungi with antifungal compounds, like most of today's anti-dandruff shampoos do, Murphy says the goal might be to make a more gentle product.
It should be about trying to restore an equilibrium. It should be about microbiome balance. It should be about the very fact that we've lived in harmony with these microbes for millions and millions of years.
Either way, it seems the old lore that a dandruffy scalp just needs a thorough cleaning might be a little flaky.
That's why there's no dandruff ever in this family.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
In 2012 in the United States, about 317,000 motor vehicle crashes involved a large truck. 26,000 truck drivers and their passengers were injured in these crashes, and about 700 died. Trucker safety requires an alert, buckled-up, experienced driver with a reliable vehicle and a strong employer safety program. Seatbelts are the most effective way to prevent an injury or death in a motor vehicle crash, but in 2013, 1 in 6 drivers of large trucks didn't use their seatbelts. Employers can help truck drivers stay safe by committing to driver safety programs at the highest level of leadership, establishing and enforcing driver safety policies, including requiring everyone in the truck to buckle up, and addressing factors that contribute to crashes, such as drowsy and distracted driving. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots Radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. Netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm dreaming of a white, non-sectarian, non-denominational, non-government-sponsored late December holiday. Hey, honey, come quick. It's the ACLU Carolers.
I'm singer-songwriter Patty Larkin, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
'Tis the season, the silly season, the time of year when some claim that the ACLU is against Christmas because we and other groups that believe in religious freedom fight to maintain the First Amendment guarantee of a wall of separation between church and state. Separation of church and state means that religious symbols, including a creche, that's a structure depicting baby Jesus in the manger, can be displayed on private property, but that public property is reserved for all the people and not one specific religion. It is the First Amendment's Establishment Clause that prohibits the government from endorsing, favoring, supporting, or trying to establish a national religion. The other half of the guarantee of religious freedom in America is the First Amendment's Free Exercise Clause. The Free Exercise Clause guarantees the right to observe and celebrate Christmas and freely exercise religious beliefs and to sing or not sing. So may your days be merry and bright, and may all your Christmases be white.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the American Civil Liberties Union, because freedom can't defend itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1908. That was the day that 3 labor leaders of the American Federation of Labor, Samuel Gompers, John Mitchell, and Frank Morrison, were sentenced to jail terms for calling for a boycott against the Buck's Stove and Range Company. Buck's was headquartered in St. Louis. The company was notorious for being anti-union. The company's president, James Van Cleve, was president of the National Association of Manufacturers, which fought unions at every turn. In 1907, Van Cleve increased the workday from 9 to 10 hours for some of the Buck's workers. The workers went out on strike. In response, the AFL put Buck's on their We Do Not Patronize list. For that, the company asked the federal courts to intervene. Buck's argued that the boycott violated the Sherman Antitrust Act. The court issued an injunction. The AFL was told not to communicate about a boycott of Buck's. They were not even allowed to criticize the company in any way. The AFL leaders were also convicted and given prison terms. The AFL appealed, and the case languished through the court system until 1914. In the end, the U.S. Supreme Court dismissed the charges. Because so much time had gone by, it was past the statute of limitations. But the court did not answer the fundamental question of whether the boycott was legal in the first place. The long, expensive legal battle was a drain on the AFL's finances. Boycotts are an important tool for working people to register protest. Labor has long argued that the right to boycott is protected by the First Amendment's right to free speech. It's not surprising, however, that company owners will do anything they can to limit the power of workers. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Yes, it's Christmas Eve. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 38 degrees Fahrenheit. We will have nearly the same temperature as we had yesterday, which will be about a high of 45. Overnight lows in the mid to low 30s, though we will be having a drying out period. Had some steady rain for the last several days, and a bit of a drying out period, though it is still wet here at the mothership at Positively 3rd and Marie. And, mostly cloudy skies this morning, becoming partly cloudy this afternoon. Winds will be light and variable. Some clouds overnight, winds will be light and variable, and a high of about 41 tomorrow when I get out of town to drive up north. I'm just worried about getting through the pass above Grants Pass. So once I get through there, I'm fine, no matter what the weather. Pollen is rated at none. Air quality index is in the good range at 48 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is at a winter low of 1. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.07 inches. Visibility is down to 6 miles, and relative humidity is at 90%. So yeah, drying out, you bet. Weather from around the world. is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 50 degrees and partly cloudy. Paris is 52 and cloudy. Rome is 58 and sunny. Kyiv is 51 with light rain. Kabul is 36 and fair. Hong Kong is 64 and fair. Tokyo is 42 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 70 degrees and cloudy with some smoke, you would expect. San Francisco, California is 43 degrees and fair. And New York is 45 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. The ever overworked anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. British supermarket giant Tesco suspended a Chinese supplier of Christmas cards on Sunday yesterday after a press report said a customer found a message written inside a card saying it had been packed by foreign prisoners who were victims of forced labor. We abhor the use of prison labor and would never allow it in our supply chain, a Tesco spokesman said, meaning that, well, until they got caught. We were shocked by these allegations because how could they get caught? It's China. And immediately suspended the factory where these cards are produced. Well, it just looks like China is continuing its practice of slavery. But I have to tell you that in a competitive free market, you cannot expect forced political slave labor to really do a good job and make a good product. You have to give them a better incentive than just gruel and a bamboo mat to sleep on a concrete floor.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Ever more anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Donald Trump has invited British Prime Minister Boris Johnson to visit him in the White House in the new year. That's great. We're going to have a Boris Johnson blimp and a baby Trump blimp. Both baby blimps. This will be fun. Trump's invitation was made after the British Prime Minister's election win this month. Well, of course, with the help of the Russians. Yes, let's not forget. They are still involved in this, and they still kept pushing the Brexit misinformation. Some potential dates have been floated in mid-January, but nothing has yet been formally agreed. But it is clear that both sides want to make it happen sometime in early 2020. The Sunday Times quoted a source close to the White House. Not in the White House, just close. Johnson is reluctant to make the visit before delivering Brexit on January 31st and would prefer to go after a cabinet reshuffle scheduled in February when he is expected to appoint Cabinet Officer Minister Michael Gove as his new trade negotiator. That could allow Johnson to take Gove to the U.S., visit ahead of talks of a post-Brexit trade deal. Wow, talk about transactional. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know that we're going to meet up tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Yes, it will be a real show right before we go on our mix of regular and special holiday programming. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Coeur. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.